The world of 2020 often seems to be a world of black and white and no in between. That is especially true of modern day America, where everything seems to be viewed through a single lens, but behind a sea of MAGA hats and petitions to tear down Confederate statues, there is still something called nuance. The United States women's national team pay dispute is a perfect example of that, with voices largely distilled to incredibly simplistic rhetoric and soundbites on both sides. On the one hand, you have prominent senators arguing that because the women's team won a game 13-0, they should automatically be paid the same as the men. On the flip side, you have faceless Twitter accounts arguing either about how bad women's football is, or about how much more money is in the men's game compared to the women's game, and therefore that it is laughable for the USWNT to be appealing for equal pay. Both, somewhat unsurprisingly, are completely missing the point. Disputes between the USWNT and the USSF, the United States Soccer Federation, are nothing new. When the USWNT won their first World Cup in 1999, the team decided to host their own exhibition tour, maximising their earning potential with true American entrepreneurial spirit, but much to the annoyance of the Federation. When the USSF threatened to sue America's first World Cup winners for the gall of going on a celebratory tour, star players like Mia Hamm threatened to retire from the international game. The USSF eventually backed down from their threats of litigation, and the USWNT had their first win. Incremental improvements in terms of the pitches, funding, and travel of America's female internationals followed, usually thanks to some form of ultimatum, and the pay dispute is an ongoing debate which has reared its head very recently for significant reasons. The first thing that is vital to establish is what exactly the USWNT are unhappy about, because I've seen plenty of debate with regards to that issue alone. The USWNT pay dispute is not an issue of club pay, only international pay. In fact, it is more specific than that, since for major tournaments like the World Cup, prize money is divvied up by FIFA rather than the USSF, so the issue revolves almost exclusively around pay for international friendly games. This is a very important distinction, for more subtle reasons that will become clear later, but also because I think some people have the idea that Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan are demanding equal pay with the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. To the best of my knowledge at least, no such argument like that has been made, at least not by anyone who plays for the USWNT, or anyone with half a brain. At club level, dispute regarding pay becomes a little simpler, since normal market forces take hold. Women's pay at club level, just like men's pay, is dictated by how much a club thinks they are worth. Traditionally, as a club or league's revenue increases without any artificial restraints, so too should player earnings, with the best players earning the most money and the worst players earning the least. Just like with the men, if a female footballer feels she can earn more money at a different team, in a different league, or in a different country than she does with her current employers, then she is free to seek alternative employment. Of course, this is a freedom not afforded to male or female players at international level since, with very rare exceptions, you cannot change nationality and therefore cannot change national teams. Now, many people have the idea that whilst that might be the case, international pay still acts roughly the same as club pay. The more money a national team brings in, the more money the players get paid. That is not necessarily the case, not just in the US, but anywhere in the world. Here in England, for example, the men's national team players are said to be paid around £2,000 a game, compared to the women's players who have FA contracts worth a minimum of £25,000 a year, with the potential to earn an extra £5,000 a year through bonuses, and even more during World Cup years. Given the fact that the men's team play around 9 to 10 games in a non-tournament year, and maybe 16 to 18 games during a year with a tournament, that basically means that English men and women's teams earn around the same amount. That is despite the fact that the English men's team is far more popular than the United States men's team. Meanwhile, the women's game hasn't traditionally enjoyed the same levels of support here in the UK as it does in the US. In an English context though, those male earnings are largely redundant, as they may one day be in the United States, since the average male England international earns in excess of £100,000 a week, so an extra £2,000 is hardly a drop in the ocean. What's more, for the last 13 years, no male England player has actually received their international fee, instead donating 100% of their international earnings to the England Footballers Foundation, which supports various charitable causes. England's female footballers, by contrast, can actually earn more from their international contracts than from their club contracts, making their international pay of far more significance to their overall earnings. All that is just a long way of saying international pay is not directly proportional to how much revenue that team generates for various footballing organisations. Nevertheless, there will be those who say that men's football generates more revenue and therefore the men should be paid more than the women at club and international level. That may be a straightforward argument across most of the world, but not in the United States, where advocates of equal pay will tell you the USWNT have generated more revenue than the USMNT since 2015. From the beginning of 2016 up until the end of 2018, USWNT friendly games generated a total of $50.8 million in revenue, compared to the $49.9 million generated by the USMNT over the same period. That is just in terms of revenue, but the women also generated more net income than the men on match days once operating costs were also taken into account. What's more, Nike CEO Mike Parker confirmed not long ago that the USWNT national team shirt is Nike's best-selling football shirt in the United States, exceeding the sales of the men's team's shirt. The commercial and matchday revenue of the USWNT being not just equal to, but greater than that of the USMNT, some would argue, is enough evidence that the women deserve equal pay, except for the fact that once again, it's not quite that simple. Games only actually account for between 25 to 30% of the US Soccer Federation's total revenue, with their main source of income, almost 50%, coming via sponsorships and endorsement deals. It is claimed that the USWNT has also generated more money than the USMNT in terms of sponsorship income since 2015, but this can't be proven since the US Soccer Federation doesn't separate the nation's male and female teams when it comes to endorsement deals. The USSF sells sponsorships in bundles, so we have an overall figure, but no breakdown or way of knowing whether sponsors were primarily motivated by sponsoring the men's or the women's teams. It is possible, therefore, that the men's teams still generate more money by virtue of sponsorship deals, but this is and will likely remain an unknown. On the balance of things, it seems reasonable to me to assume that the USWNT have brought in very similar, if not greater revenue to the USSF since 2015, but it's worth noting that 2015 cutoff date that we keep coming back to. All the talk about revenue seems to begin in 2015, and my research could not find reputable data for the years preceding 2015. 2015 is a significant start date because the years from 2015 up to the present day have been particularly good for the USWNT and particularly bad for the USMNT. The United States women's team won the 2015 FIFA Women's World Cup, and they made it back-to-back World Cup wins for the first time at the 2019 finals in France. The USWNT have also won 3 She Believes Cups, 1 Gold Cup, 1 Algarve Cup, and 1 Cup of Nations since 2015. For the men's team, on the other hand, the 2015 cut-off date obviously excludes the 2014 World Cup, in which they reached the last 16, but includes the 2018 World Cup, which was the first World Cup since 1986, which the USMNT have failed to qualify for. The USMNT have won just one of a possible 3 Gold Cups during that time, in what has been an era of considerable setback for men's soccer in the US. Taking that into account, an unprecedented era of success including 2 World Cups for the women, compared to the worst period in 30 years for the men, which leaves out their decent performance at the 2014 World Cup, I think it is reasonable to suspect this has been a period in which the USWNT's revenue is likely higher than average, and the USMNT's revenue almost certainly lower than average. Of course, the counter-argument to that fact is that it isn't the fault of the women's team that they have been successful and that the men have not, but it is worth taking into account in order to have a holistic view of the respective teams' earning potential. And as stated, it is unfortunate that the 2015 cut-off date includes 2 World Cups for the women's team and only 1 for the men. Hopefully that has unpicked a lot of the confusion and misconceptions with regards to the revenue argument, but it's probably about time we looked at how much the women's team earns versus the men's. USWNT players get a base salary from the USSF of $100,000, meanwhile USMNT players get no base salary at all. However, the USMNT players get paid a minimum $5,000 per friendly game when they lose, and as much as $17,625 should they win against a highly ranked international team. The USWNT, on the other hand, don't get any bonus if they lose, or even if they draw, against a nation ranked lower than 9th in the world rankings, and their maximum win bonus against the highest ranked national teams is just $8,500. As briefly mentioned before, this does not include the most important competition for both teams, the FIFA World Cup. The total prize money for the 2018 World Cup finals in Russia was $400 million, with the winners France receiving $38 million. The total prize money for the 2019 Women's World Cup finals in France was $30 million, with the USWNT receiving $4 million for winning the tournament. Overall, the prize money for the men's tournament is around 13 times greater than the women's, but there are 8 more teams in the men's tournament, so on a per team basis, the men's prize money is exactly 10 times the women's. Much like the USSF, FIFA sells its World Cup sponsorships and broadcasting rights in bundles, so the organisation don't know the exact value of each tournament. Unlike with the USSF, the Men's World Cup is obviously far more lucrative for FIFA than the Women's Tournament, but whether it's 10 or 13 times more valuable is essentially guesswork. Back in 2014, the USMNT received $9 million to be distributed at the USSF's indiscretion for the team reaching the World Cup round of 16, more than double the amount the USWNT earned for the USSF for winning the Women's World Cup in 2015 or 2019. This is not part of the pay dispute between the USWNT players and the USSF that has come back into prominence due to a court ruling recently though, and I should talk briefly about that court ruling. A United States court, to the surprise of many who have followed this case, rejected the USWNT players' claims that they were underpaid in relation to the men, citing, above all else, the fact that the women's team players had earned more than the men on both a cumulative and per-game basis over the class period. That is true, the women's team have out-earned the men due to the men's salaries being paid solely on a bonus structure and the team having performed so poorly in recent years. Far be it from me to critique a court judge, whose expertise on this matter is likely to be many magnitudes greater than my own, but that seems an unusual reason to throw out the pay dispute. Because the men's team are paid only through bonuses, and they sometimes play as few as 5 friendly games in a calendar year, it is possible that the men could only earn $25,000 over 12 months. That would mean the USWNT would only actually have to earn $26,000 to out-earn the men in that scenario, so it seems unusual for that alone to be sufficient grounds to reject the players' claims. The judge did allow the players' case relating to unfair treatment in terms of travel, housing, and medical support, but not pay. That came as a blow to the WSNT players, but it may prove unimportant in the long term. The USWNT's legal representatives have already confirmed that they will appeal the judgment, and given the current time restraints put on legal proceedings by the global health crisis, this is one which is likely to rumble on. Whether they are right or wrong, the USSF consider this to be a PR disaster, and they're keen for it to go away. The USWNT are believed to have been offered a $9 million settlement already, and a much larger settlement may well be offered and accepted at some stage, along with a change in future terms and arrangements to USWNT players' pay. There is a final point which is worth mentioning. For all the talk of revenue and commercial value, one could argue that none of that should really be the driving force behind these discussions. Both the USSF, and FIFA for that matter, are not for-profit organisations. Their goal is not to grow profits, but to grow the sport in the United States in the case of the USSF, and across the globe in the case of FIFA. The USSF has a surplus of around $150 million, whilst FIFA sit on a cash pile of close to $3 billion, but nevertheless, those are the supposed purposes of the respective organisations. For most major national teams, and that includes the United States, international fees and World Cup bonuses are far more significant to women's overall earnings than they are to the men. The USMNT, including significant figures like Tim Howard, have come out in support of the USWNT in their fight against the United States Soccer Federation. Whether you feel the USWNT deserve to earn more, less, or exactly what they earn now, hopefully this video has helped clear up some of the misconceptions surrounding the USWNT pay dispute. Thank you for watching, as always, and if you enjoyed the video, then hit the like button, and do feel free to subscribe to HITC Sevens.